The luxury showroom is a temple of glass and light, the marble floor reflecting the glow of $1 million machine. A brand new supercar sits in the center, pristine, untouchable, never driven. Catherine Holt, the billionaire CEO, stands with her arms crossed, a faint, mocking smirk on her lips. Before her stands a single dad in a worn work jacket, his hands stained with engine oil. Behind her, the executive team snickers in the shadows. Catherine shakes her head. "You think you understand this engine?" She pulls a titanium key from her pocket, spins it slowly on her finger, and drops it into his hand. The entire room stops breathing. His name is Thomas Reed, 47 years old, a man whose presence is as quiet as the shadows of a garage at midnight. To the high-profile investors and tech giants gathered at the Holt Automotive flagship facility, he is a ghost, a piece of the scenery that doesn't belong. The air in the showroom smells of expensive leather, ozone, and the cold scent of extreme wealth. Thomas doesn't wear a tailored silk suit or a $2,000 watch. He is wearing a faded, olive-drab work jacket with a small tear on the left sleeve, and his boots carry the dust of a dozen different job sites. He stands against the far wall, his large, calloused hands deep in his pockets, watching the high-stakes theater with eyes that have seen the inside of more engines than most people have seen movies. In the corner of the VIP lounge, sitting on a plush leather sofa that probably costs more than Thomas's truck, is 9-year-old Emma. She is Thomas's heartbeat, his only compass in a world that has grown increasingly loud, aggressive, and hollow. Emma is waiting for her father to finish his consultation, clutching a worn sketch pad where she draws mechanical gears, piston heads, and suspension arrays instead of flowers. To Emma, her dad is a wizard who can fix a broken toaster, a dead battery, or a vintage lawnmower with a single, intuitive twist of a wrench. She doesn't know that the men in this room once considered her father the architect of velocity. Thomas takes these short-term, contract mechanic jobs because they provide the one thing a high-stakes corporate career couldn't: time. Time to pick Emma up from school at exactly 3:15 p.m., time to cook real dinners, and time to be the father she needs in the silence of their small home. 10 years ago, the name Thomas Reed was spoken in hushed, almost religious whispers within the world's most secretive racing programs. He was the man who decided if a car lived or died, the lead evaluation engineer who found the breaking point of every multi-million-dollar prototype. He lived for the scream of the turbine and the scent of burnt magnesium. But then, the Black Circuit accident happened. During a high-speed endurance run in the deserts of Nevada, a mechanical failure in the manifold that Thomas had predicted and had begged the board of directors to address claimed the life of his best friend and wingman, Elias. Thomas didn't just walk away that day. He vanished into the fog of history. He buried his racing gloves, his certifications, and his burning ambition. He chose a life of grease and silence, trading the roar of the crowd for the quiet, heavy pride of raising Emma alone. He vowed never to touch a machine of that caliber again, until today. He had only come here because an old, retired foreman, a man who knew the truth about his past, had called him with a voice full of desperation. "They're going to kill someone else, Tom," the old man had whispered. "The sovereignty is a beast they don't understand." Catherine Holt is the absolute opposite of silence. At 42, she is the reigning queen of the automotive world, a woman who believes that precision can be bought and loyalty is just another line on a balance sheet. She is brilliant, ruthless, and today, she is incredibly frustrated. Her flagship supercar, the Holt Sovereign, is the pride of the corporation. It is meant to be the fastest, smartest machine ever built. But a recurring technical glitch, a stutter in the torque distribution that nobody can explain, has delayed the launch twice. The investors are nervous. The board is looking for blood. Catherine has called in every top-tier specialist in the country, and they have all failed. Thomas Reed was her last resort, A man recommended as a specialist in older mechanical stresses. Catherine looks at Thomas and sees a nobody, a grease monkey in a world of digital gods. She has no idea she is looking at the man who wrote the very laws of dynamics her cars are trying to break. The Holt Sovereign is more than a car. It is a $3 million statement of global power. It sits under the blinding white spotlights like a predator waiting to strike. But right now, it is a silent, stubborn piece of carbon fiber. The internal engineering team, led by a man named Marcus who prides himself on his MIT degree and his perfect manicure, is in the middle of a heated, desperate argument. They are surrounded by glowing screens, analyzing terabytes of data, trying to find the bug that causes the engine to stall whenever it shifts into sport mode under a cold load. "It's a sensor lag in the B-bus," Marcus shouts, his face pale in the blue light of his tablet. "The AI is overcompensating for the thermal expansion in the fuel rail. We need to rewrite the ignition mapping from scratch." Catherine Holt paces the length of the showroom, her designer heels clicking like a ticking clock against the polished marble floor. She is done with data. She is done with theories. She looks at her watch, then turns her sharp, clinical gaze toward the back of the room, toward the man in the worn jacket who has been standing silently for 3 hours, watching. "You," Catherine says, her voice cutting through the engineer's noise like a sharpened blade. "Mr. Reed, you've been watching my team fail all morning. You haven't said a word. Do you have a theory? Or are you just enjoying the free espresso?" Thomas steps out from the shadows, his movements slow, deliberate, and heavy with a presence the others lack. He doesn't look at the monitors or the complex graphs. He looks at the car, specifically at the way the exhaust tips are angled. "Your team is looking at the code, Ms. Holt," Thomas says, his voice a low, steady rumble that seems to calm the air. "The code is fine. It's perfect. Actually, the problem is physical. The car is trying to protect itself from a ghost in the manifold. It's a design flaw that no algorithm can fix because the algorithm thinks the manifold is a perfect shape. It isn't." A few of the junior engineers let out a short, derisive laugh. One of them snickers. "A ghost? This is the most advanced machine on the planet. Not a haunted house, old man. Maybe you should stick to fixing tractors." Catherine's lip curls into a smirk, a look of pure, elite amusement. She wants to humiliate the man who thinks he knows more than her hand-picked experts. She wants to show the investors that the old school is dead. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out the titanium key fob, the master key to the Sovereign. "You think you understand this car better than the people who built it?" Catherine asks, challenging him in front of the entire room. She spins the key slowly on her index finger, the metal catching the light like a weapon. "Fine. If you're so sure it's not the code, prove it." Most mechanics spend their whole lives dreaming of just seeing this cockpit. Today, I'm feeling charitable. If you're wrong, you leave without pay and your name goes on a blacklist. If you're right, well, we'll see. She takes 2 steps forward, the scent of her perfume hitting Thomas like a wall, and places the key into his calloused, grease-stained palm. "Don't just fix it," she mocks. "Drive it. Take it to the private test track outside. If you can make it shift through the range without stalling, I'll give you a bonus that will pay for your daughter's college in cash. If you stall it, you walk out the door and never come back. Do we have a deal?" The managers behind her snicker. No one believes he will take the key. They expect him to stutter, to make an excuse, to retreat back into the shadows. But Thomas Reed doesn't flinch. He looks at the key, then at the car, and then, for the first time, he looks directly into Catherine Holt's eyes. It is a gaze so steady, so heavy with 20 years of hard truth, that Catherine actually feels a shiver of genuine, unexpected doubt. Thomas doesn't say a word. He simply closes his hand over the titanium, the metal disappearing into his powerful grip. "Emma," Thomas calls out softly, his voice carrying across the silent room. The little girl looks up from her sketch pad, her eyes wide. "Yeah, Dad. Watch this," he says, a small, tired wink being his only tell. Thomas walks toward the car. He doesn't rush. He doesn't show off. He moves with the effortless authority of a king returning to a throne he abandoned long ago. The crowd of engineers parts for him like a receding tide. They are silent now, the mockery replaced by a strange, electric curiosity. Catherine stands with her arms crossed, her smirk still there, but her heart is starting to beat against her ribs. She doesn't know why, but for the first time in her career, she feels like she isn't the one in control. Thomas Reed doesn't sit in the driver's seat immediately. He walks a full circle around the Holt Sovereign, a ritual of the old guard. He stops at the front intake. He runs a bare hand along the rear fender, feeling the micro vibrations of the floor. He kneels down to check the tire temperature with the back of his hand. He isn't looking for scratches. He is feeling the machine's soul. He leans in close to the engine bay, closing his eyes, listening to the soft, metallic ticking of the metal as it cools from the previous failed test. To him, that ticking is a language. It tells him where the stress is hiding. Finally, he opens the door. The cabin is a cockpit of carbon fiber, holographic displays, and the smell of the future. Thomas slides into the seat, but he doesn't look at the screens. He reaches down and adjusts the seat manually, his hands finding the perfect ergonomic center that the computers missed. He puts the key into the slot. The V12 engine doesn't just start, it barks to life with a ferocious, terrifying roar that echoes off the glass walls of the showroom, making the investors jump. It's a sound of raw power. But to Thomas, there is a tiny, microscopic discordance in the idle. He doesn't rev the engine. He waits. He watches the needle of the analog backup gauge, waiting for the exact microscopic moment when the oil pressure stabilizes and the manifold reaches 140 degrees. He shifts into gear. The sound is a clean, crisp, mechanical clack. He drives the car out of the showroom and onto the private test track, moving so slowly it looks like a funeral procession. The engineers are whispering into their headsets. He's afraid. He can't handle the 800 horsepower. He's crawling. Catherine stands by the glass wall, her eyes narrowed, her fingers tapping against her arm. Then, Thomas reaches the straightaway. The change is instantaneous. The engine note shifts from a growl to a scream. Thomas doesn't use the automatic shift. He engages the manual paddles. He isn't just driving, he is performing a symphony of physics. He pushes the car into a sharp, high-speed corner, the rear wheels dancing on the absolute edge of a slide, but never losing their line. In the pit lane, the monitors come alive. The data stream is a perfect, beautiful curve. The torque distribution, which had been stuttering and glitching all morning, is now a solid, unwavering line of performance. How? Marcus gasps, staring at his tablet in disbelief. He's bypassing the AI override. He's using a manual cadence that the computer didn't even think was possible. He's shifting before the sensor trigger. Thomas pushes the car into sport mode. This was the moment of consistent failure, the moment when every other specialist had stalled the engine. Thomas doesn't hesitate. He hits the shift at exactly 8,200 RPM, a fraction of a second before the computer would have intervened. The Sovereign doesn't stall, it doesn't stutter. It surges forward with a violence that leaves two black lines of rubber on the asphalt, a roar of defiance echoing across the facility. Inside the cockpit, Thomas feels the old, familiar peace. The noise of the world is gone, the grief, the accident, the shadows of the past. They are all replaced by the pure, raw connection between man and metal. He knows exactly what was wrong. The car wasn't glitching, it was being suffocated by its own intelligence. The cold start distribution algorithm was assuming a friction coefficient that didn't exist in the real world. By shifting early and holding the torque manually, Thomas was teaching the car how to breathe again. He was the air in its lungs. He brings the supercar back into the showroom, the engine purring like a giant, contented cat. He stops the car exactly where it started, down to the millimeter. He turns off the ignition. The silence that follows is heavy, absolute, and deafening. Thomas Reed steps out of the car. He isn't sweating. He isn't smiling. He looks exactly as he did when he walked in, a man who just did a job. He walks over to Catherine Holt, who is standing paralyzed, her mouth slightly open. Her arms finally drop to her sides. The smirk is gone. In its place is a look of pure, visceral, shattering shock. He holds out his hand. The titanium key sits in the center of his palm, reflecting the overhead lights. "It's not the code, Ms. Holt," Thomas says quietly, his voice steady as iron. "It's the distribution manifold. It's a design you approved 4 years ago for a different chassis. It's too small for this much air. It causes a back pressure wave that confuses your AI. The car knows it. Now you know it too. The key is yours." The room is deathly quiet. The engineers are staring at their feet. The investors are looking at Catherine. Emma runs over to her dad, hugging his waist with a giant smile. "You did it, Daddy. The car sounded happy when you drove it." Thomas ruffles her hair, a soft light in his eyes. "Yeah, buddy. It just needed someone to listen to it for a minute. That's all." Catherine looks at the key, then at the man in the old jacket. She realizes that the mechanic she had tried to mock was the only one in the room who had actually told her the truth. She realizes that her flagship was saved not by a computer, but by a master who knew the heart of the machine. Thomas Reed begins to gather his small metal toolbox. He doesn't wait for the bonus or the applause. He doesn't care about the cameras or the famous names in the room. He has done his 10 minutes. His shift is over. He wants to take Emma for the ice cream he promised her 3 hours ago. "Wait," Catherine calls out, her voice lacking its usual corporate steel, sounding almost human for the first time. "Stop. You can't just leave. Who are you? Really, I've seen the best drivers in the world, and none of them can shift a sovereign like that." Thomas stops. He doesn't turn around immediately. He looks at his daughter, who is watching him with wide, curious eyes. He takes a long breath. "I told you, Mrs. Holt. I'm just a guy who understands how metal breathes. That's all the world needs to know." "No," Catherine says, stepping forward, her heels clicking softly. She signals to her head of security, a man who has been frantically searching his private database. The guard hands her a tablet. His face is pale as a ghost. Catherine looks at the screen. She sees a photo from 12 years ago. A younger, sharper, more arrogant Thomas Reed, standing next to the world's most advanced racing prototype, receiving the Engineer of the Decade award from the International Federation. The file notes: status, retired. Location, unknown. Reason, personal tragedy. The room falls into a different kind of silence, a silence of deep, burning respect. The engineers who were laughing minutes ago now look like they want to disappear into the floorboards. They realize they had been lecturing the man whose textbooks they had studied in university, the man whose designs provided the foundation for their entire careers. "You designed the original Vortex chassis," Catherine whispers, the realization hitting her like a physical blow to the stomach. "You warned the industry about the manifold fatigue years ago. I remember the report now. I was a junior executive at the time. I thought you were just being difficult. I thought you were standing in the way of progress." Thomas turns to face her, his eyes hard but not angry. "I wasn't being difficult, Ms. Holt. I was being honest. The manifold failed, and I lost a brother because of it. I didn't leave because I was tired of cars. I left because I was tired of people who cared more about the launch date than the lives inside the machines. Progress without a soul is just a faster way to die." Catherine lowers her head. For the first time in her brilliant, unstoppable career, she is the one who is small. She is the one of no consequence. She looks at the investors, then at her team, then back at Thomas. She sees the grease on his hands, and for the first time, she understands that those stains are a badge of honor. They represent a man who actually does the work, a man who listens when the world is screaming. "I mocked you," she says, her voice trembling. a rare crack in her armor. I treated you like a nuisance. I handed you those keys as a joke, hoping you would fail so I could feel superior. I am, I am so sorry, Thomas, for everything. Thomas just nods. We all have our ghosts, Ms. Holt. Yours just happens to be made of carbon fiber and arrogance. I'm just glad the car is safe for the launch. My daughter and I will be going now. We have a pizza and ice cream date. No, please, Catherine says, her pride finally crumbling into ash. I want to apologize publicly to you and to your daughter. She turns to the entire room, her voice resonant, clear, and commanding in a new way. Attention, everyone. I made a grave, nearly fatal mistake today. I judged a man by his cover, and I almost lost the future of this company because of my own ego. This man is Commander Thomas Reed. He is the reason this car exists. He is the reason we are all standing here safely today. We owe him more than a bonus. We owe him our respect, and I owe him my life. A slow, rhythmic applause begins. It builds until the showroom is shaking. The tech titans, the managers, the guards. They are all standing for the man in the faded jacket. Thomas doesn't wave. He doesn't smile for the cameras. He just squeezes Emma's hand, his eyes fixed on the exit. The showroom is quieted down. The investors have gone back to the lounge, their confidence restored. But the atmosphere is fundamentally different. It's no longer about the glitter and the hype. It's about the truth. Catherine finds Thomas in the parking lot. He is loading his small metal toolbox into the back of an old, reliable truck that has seen better decades. Emma is sitting in the passenger seat, humming a song, her sketchpad already open again. Thomas, wait, I have a proposal, Catherine says, standing by the truck's tailgate. She isn't the CEO right now. She's just a woman trying to fix a mistake. I'm restructuring my entire engineering division. Starting tonight, I'm firing the board of safety directors who ignored your reports. I need a chief of evaluation, someone who doesn't rely on a screen, someone who knows how to listen to the metal. I'm offering you the position. Name your price. Any number. Thomas pauses, his hand resting on the truck's tailgate. He looks at Catherine, then at Emma, then back at the massive Holt building behind them. I have one price, Ms. Holt, and it doesn't involve a bank account or a stock option. Catherine blinks, confused. What is it? Anything. I pick up my daughter at 3:15 every day, Thomas says, his voice firm, absolute, and final. I don't work weekends. I don't do international press tours. I don't do corporate galas. My job is to be her father. The engineering, that's just what I do to keep my mind sharp. If your company needs me more than she does, then you don't need me at all. That is my only contract. Catherine smiles, a real, genuine, warm smile that transforms her face, melting the ice that had been there for years. You pick her up at 3:15. You have a private office with a lounge for her right next to yours, and you have full authority over every machine I own. Your priority is Emma. My priority is making sure a man of your talent never has to hide in the shadows again. We need the man who saved the sovereignty to lead us. The offer was accepted. Emma runs over to Catherine and gives her a small, toothy smile. Thank you for the big car ride, Miss CEO. My dad is the best at driving, isn't he? Catherine kneels down, looking the little girl in the eye with a kindness she hadn't felt in a decade. Thank you for sharing your dad with us, Emma. He isn't just a driver. He's a hero. As they walk back into the facility, the Holt Sovereign is still sitting in the center of the showroom, its engine still warm, its soul finally at peace. The impossible car was now a symbol of something else. It was a reminder that in a world of digital perfection, the human touch and the human ear are still the most powerful tools we have. Thomas Reed didn't look back. He had his daughter, he had his dignity, and for the first time in 10 years, he could finally breathe as easily as the engine he just saved. The silence of the past was gone, replaced by the roar of a future he thought was impossible. He gripped Emma's hand, and together, they walked toward a new dawn, the titanium key heavy in his pocket, but his heart light for the first time in a decade. If you believe that real talent doesn't need a suit to be heard, subscribe for more stories of the masters hidden in plain sight. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated just because you chose to stay silent? Let's talk about it below.